Hola, this is my favorite fireside chat. As a fact, the only one in the entire Hispanic Leadership Summit. We've been going through a couple of days and a number of sessions discussing how to unify the community, how to bring us together under the same framework. And I think that what I love about the opportunity of talking to two titans of the creative and the branding industry is that we can go also personal. One of the best stories that I have heard is yours, Mark, when you tell your personal story about how did you start, and also like it's important because for many of us our leadership path is different and learning from each other. I'd like to tell you mine. I'm going to start because I've never told you mine. My father was as a civil engineer and built highways in Mexico. So he took me as a kid everywhere to see his beauties, right? Like to see his. So we went from Mexico to Acapulco, from Mexico to Ixtapa, and then backwards and so on. And it was a time in which there was no GPS. So I always had to do the paper maps. Do you remember those? And so folding, unfolding, and so on, and saying to the right, to the left. And so he always told me that I was a great co-pilot. He was like, so you're such a great co-pilot. I'll take you into my next trip because you're such a good co-pilot. And so here we are 5 years ago when I look at my resume and I look that my entire life I've been the right hand of someone, that I've been a co-pilot my entire life. My father, without any intention, just gave me that role, gave me the sense that I was going to be a great co-pilot. And I'm like, no complaint about my pilots. My pilots have been awesome. Like the Secretary General of the United Nations, the President of the World Economic Forum. But then when I started looking at my path to the future and looking at ways in which my daughter could have role models in the C-suite and corporate America, I thought I have to actually give it a try to move from co-pilot to pilot. And that's how it was really scary to move from a big organization with more than 6,000 colleagues in 193 countries in every organization I've been to all of a sudden start a new thing to be a pilot. But I think that was the first time in which I decided that it was important to not only preach water and drink wine, but also actually do the leadership that I was expecting others to give me an opportunity for. What about you?
Luis, Marc, I want to hear your story.
You want to hear my story? Well, first of all, it's been a pleasure and an honor to be your co-pilots this year. We've had an amazing journey. Let me start with my personal story. I joke and I say that I'm your typical Romanian Hispanic. Both of my parents were from Romania. I was literally made in London. And my dad, who spoke, I think, 7 or 8 languages, was transferred to Mexico on a 6-month assignment. He was the chief financial officer for Shell Oil in the UK. And I was, born in Mexico City. My parents fell in love with the culture and the country, and they ended up staying. My dad kept telling his bosses that he didn't care. He didn't care about anything else but to raise a family in Mexico and give us the opportunity to live a life in which he thought that there was a good balance between the personal and the professional side. Funny enough, after starting my career in advertising in Mexico, I was found by a headhunter that hired me for what back then used to be the largest Hispanic agency at the time, Mendoza Dillon in California. And almost intuitively, after a few months, I realized that I could make a difference in the Hispanic market. So my personal mission has been to help elevate the image of Latinos in the workplace and across screens. And that is my hidden agenda, hidden and not so hidden. It's been an amazing journey. We started with 12 people 25 years ago, and we're now over 150 people from 32 different nationalities. And of course, diversity and inclusion have been part of our DNA, both personally and as a company. So here I am representing Círculo Creativo and Alma, and honored to be in your company.
I love that story. I hadn't heard that story. That's really great to hear that, Luis Miguel. And Claudia, I am honored and privileged to be your co-pilot as well. So you really, yeah, you're a heck of a pilot. So I appreciate this, and you've brought us together here, and we're making a difference now. And I look back at my story. My dad was Mexican American, and he was adopted by a man with an English name named Pritchard, and he grew up in Denver, Colorado. Was quite poor in the Mexican American community. I think was able to pull himself out and go to college. The first one in his family to go to college. Ended up working in a hospital, and then ended up getting into marketing and sales and in the healthcare area. He married my mom, who was German American, and then they had me and my brother and my sister. So I had the benefit of being part of the Hispanic community and part of the Caucasian community. And it's very interesting because I growing up, I felt very connected to the Mexican part of my family and my culture. And I also was a bit of an activist because my dad was a bit of an activist. I mean, he spent a lot of time going up and helping migrant farm workers and helping them advance. And I can very much remember, his love for Cesar Chavez and the work that they were doing, and he kind of emulated that. And he would take me along up into Wattenberg or Wate, which is the migrant farm worker town where we would be able to help provide healthcare to those families. So I give you that because I carried that activism somewhat into my college years. But then when I got into my professional life, I really kind of I didn't more than kind of suppress. I suppressed my Mexican heritage. And I did it, because I think back on this of my dad. I can remember very clearly when I was, saw the prejudice that he faced as a Chicano in Denver, and some of the things that I witnessed and some of the stories that he told. And then when it came to trying to get a job and get a good education, very simple questions like on applications, what should I mark? Should I mark Hispanic or Caucasian? He said, you mark Caucasian. Why? Well, because you're going to have a better chance of getting a better job. You will be judged differently if you're viewed as Hispanic. And I remember kind of a twinge when that happened, but then, it didn't really connect with me until many years later, when I realized, in the past, in my role that I'm in now, my dad said, you need to get a job in business. I said I wanted to be in journalism because I loved communication. He said, no, you're going to need to go in business because you need to make money. But I always loved journalism. And I look now, I became the chief marketing officer. And I think it allowed me to combine my communications love with business. And now I'm in a position that I'm achieving my destiny, which is my destiny is to do what you just described, Luis Miguel, which is to ensure that I bring the accurate representation and the accurate portrayal of all humanity. And I bring the full, beauty of the Hispanic community, connecting with Claudia on this mission of the Hispanic Star. I came out a few years ago and fully embraced and admitted that I had been suppressing my Mexican heritage. And I came out in a very emotional moment externally at Ad Color first, and then internally in my company. And I said, I am proud to be a Mexican American. And I did that because it created emotional safety for everyone to have conversations. And it created this, galvanizing force to do even more. And I'm so passionate now, and I'm so honored and privileged to be actually both of your co-pilots to help out. And we're now doing some things to make a big difference. And there's so much more that we can do.
Definitely. You know, you bring to mind something that I've been talking about, which is creative activism and also brand journalism. Because in a way, our business has evolved in such a way in which we're developing content and we are writing a journal almost on a daily basis on behalf of our brands.
You're absolutely right, Luis Miguel. You know, when you think about it, one of the things that we did recently, as you know, is in the wake of COVID and the fact that 80% of Hispanic adults have jobs on the front lines and are more susceptible to COVID, not getting the care that they need. We joined forces with Claudia, who brought us Hispanic Star and created that foundation. And then we got together and we did some creative journalism together and created with Alma and Secretario Creativo, brought that together for the Estamos Unidos campaign. And that activism then allowed us, that creative activism allowed us to raise money with Altissimo, with the Hispanic Star, with the Dolores Huerta 90th birthday, and advance the community during this thing. So I think that's the power of what we can do when we join forces. Claudia, tell us about Hispanic Star. Let's talk about Hispanic Star. Like, why did you do that? Why did you bring that out? And why did you grab folks like me and Luis Miguel to help you with that?
And how can we use that? We will have an entire section in the program about Hispanic Star, but what I would love to do is, Hispanic Star, I would love to have you guys invite everybody else. You're the jefes. I want you to tell everybody else why is this a good thing. But before that, you see, what you both said about your personal stories is what's happening. This is what I keep on hearing all the time. People coming out in their Latinidad, people actually getting more united and doing things more like the examples of Estamos Unidos. That was such a beauty. And of course, it pulls hair for 8 days, right? We didn't sleep for 8 days putting that together. The fastest campaign in the planet. But those are great examples that have great impact. Now the question is, how do we systemize that? How do we put systemic, what kind of structures do we put so that they can become systemic change? You see, NASDAQ came out a couple of days ago saying, I will not have companies if they don't have diversity in their C-suites and boards. Larry Fink with BlackRock, he was saying, I will not invest in companies that don't have sustainability in their portfolios. Everybody's like super, like going into there because they need the funding. So how do we do this? What's a structure that we can have? You have CMC and ANA, and I'm dreaming about like what kind of quotas exist or don't, what kind of like requisites and prerequisites are we going to be creating so that everyone like you, Marc, you're the biggest and better advertiser of the world, but what else about the other companies or what else of the other agencies can we have a sense of what exists and what needs to be done so that we can even advance this forward? We can do this. We just need the systems ready.
I think we need to clone Marc.
Go ahead, Luis.
We need to clone you, and we need to clone you and have more Marc Pritchards across corporate America. I think what you have done, both personally and as P&G, is a gold standard. When I look at the work we did together, but when I also look at the amazing pieces you have put out around African American, the talk, the choice. I get goosebumps, and I think P&G has done two very important things. I quote you all the time on my conferences and articles. You said, if you're not doing multicultural marketing, you're not doing marketing, and I think it's so true. And it's altruistic, but it's also selfish. You reap the benefits when you commit to multicultural marketing and DEI initiatives. You benefit in terms of innovation across your teams, and that's where the growth is coming on behalf of brands. So I say it jokingly, but if we had more Marc Pritchards, dictating the pace and opening people's eyes, because I think what Claudia has done is brought us together, but also Hispanic Star is an eye opener. I say that this pandemic has been horrible, and of course we have a lot of ugly things around us. But this year has also brought some incredible and positive things. I think the pandemic has been an equalizer. It has demonstrated that we are all the same and we're all in it together. It has been an accelerator. Technologies have really made a difference in our lives, and it has forced us to adopt digital and technological advancement. And I think, and my hope is that it will turn out to be a GPS that will bring us back on track and show us the right path, and put priorities in order. I think we lost sight that being together, focusing on family, focusing on our homes, focusing on the well-being of our communities is the priority. And it's, we're going to come out strengthened, and I think we're going to appreciate being able to travel, being able to spend time with loved ones. I think in a way it was a big adjustment, and we needed it.
I think Luis, Miguel, you're right. I think this pandemic was just a big wake-up call. And what it did is it said, humanity needs to take a time out and take a look at itself. And unfortunately, it has come with some very painful consequences. But what it's done is that, to your point, is that it's actually done exactly what Claudia's name of her company has said, is it helped us identify that we are all human. And therefore, we need to take some action to make a difference. And so if we just think about, what we're trying to do at P&G, and there are many other companies doing the same thing. And I think we're joining forces, and that's what's the beauty of things like Hispanic Star, which, because it shines the light on things, is we are trying to use our voice and use our reach as a force for good and a force for growth. And it is important to do both, to your point. Being a force for good without growth is philanthropy, and there's nothing wrong with philanthropy, but it's not sustainable. Being a force for growth without any good is somewhat mercenary. So doing both creates a virtuous cycle. And the focus that we have, that we're also then bringing the ANA along with, the Association of National Advertisers, and the Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing, and all of the 400 CMOs of major companies, is to focus on, number one, just equality, equal representation. Start with equal representation in whatever supply chain you may be a part of. So in our world, it's the creative and media supply chain, equal representation. That means it's representation at our companies, at our agencies we work with our production crews, with our media companies, and companies can actually demand that. I can't tell my agencies who to hire, but I can say that preferred agencies will be ones that are diverse, and then measure it. We measure our numbers, and we ask others to give us their measurements in terms of where they stand. And it's eye-opening. We have about 10% of our management population are Hispanic. Now that's not bad, but it's not good enough, because the Hispanic population is 18% of the population. So we got some work to do. Second thing we're focusing on: eliminate systemic investment inequalities in the creative and media supply chain. Less than 5% of marketing spending is spent on some form of multicultural marketing in and among multiculturally owned and operated businesses. That's unacceptable. The system, unfortunately, though, has been built for the majority. Some say the system's broken. It's not broken. It was built for the majority. We need to make systemic breakdowns. So, for example, we've recently met with several CEOs of Hispanic as well as Black and Asian Pacific owned and operated media companies to say, okay, what do we need to do? So we need to create a new ecosystem. We're now going out and developing and hiring more and more multicultural agencies. That's why we worked with you, on Alma to create things. But those are systemic investment inequalities. The third one I would say is they eliminate bias and racism in all forms of advertising, content, media, and news. And that's something we can have a direct effect on. We're the world's largest advertisers, so the accurate portrayal of the Hispanic community is absolutely critical, because when you are accurately portraying and accurately representing, then what you're doing is you're helping people understand this is reality. So you eliminate bias by doing so, and then periodically taking a stand, like we did with Estamos, Unidos. So these are steps. Claudia, you asked what are the steps we can take. Those are the steps that we're taking. Those are the steps that we've invited, and we've brought together CMOs from around the industry to take action on it. ANA and AIM are doing this, and I would invite everybody on this this call. There's 2,000 people here. You can do your part. We all joined forces. We can make a difference here.
I love those 3 points. I love them. And I really think that you see, one day when I was leaving the Sustainable Development Goals, working at the United Nations, I was working with SAP, as a fact, the company, and they were putting together their annual Sapphire big summit. And all of a sudden they started panicking because they had to change the way that they did their dinners. They had to be sustainable chefs, sustainable catering, sustainable. All of a sudden I was like, this is it. That's the measure of success. When you manage to get the entire industry thinking at the level of a dinner planning, you made it. So we will work together with the Hispanic Star, with Estamos Unidos, Procter & Gamble, with ANA, and whomever needs to be part of the CMC to make sure that we have equal representation in the creative and media industry, that we have systemic investment in doubling the amount of investment, the dollars that we have for our community, and eliminating bias. And I think that we have the measurement. I think that we have the goals. We got a plan. I think we do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think we ought to do, Luis Miguel, in the agency world in particular as well? Just to tell us a little more about, what are some of the interventions, because that's an area that really is needed.
I've written a lot on this topic in the last few months. Funny enough, because as an industry, we're supposed to be the innovators, the trendsetters, and I think we're late in the game. I think as an industry, we should have known better. And I see a lot of agencies trying to become more diverse, but it's not just about hiring one of each. It has become almost like a check. It's about diversity of faces, but also diversity of voices. If you bring people just for the color of their skin and you don't include them, you don't give them decision power, it really defeats the purpose. And Claudia and I have talked a lot about the importance of not only doing diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, but you have to combine them with multicultural marketing, because otherwise, you don't communicate to your constituencies what you're really committed to do. I think Procter is a good example. Earlier today, I had a session with Rishat Tobacowola and Rodrigo Fernandez de Castro from Pepsi. I think Pepsi is another good example of a company that decided to turn things around, recommit to multicultural marketing. Not only they changed the way they go to market, they created a Hispanic business unit with their own P&L, and it has made a difference. And they're seeing the not only the turnaround, but the growth. For almost a year, they've seen growth over growth over growth. So again, to your point earlier, we do it from the goodness of our heart, because we have a responsibility as communicators, and we also do it because we need to grow our companies in order to create this cycle of benefit for the communities, for our stakeholders, and for our people. So I think I love the idea of togetherness. I think if I had to summarize The biggest learning from this year is togetherness. I think we need to work together. Companies, foundations like Claudia has shown us, and the advertising industry to support brands, to support companies, because creativity can be a force for good, and we can really make a difference.
You made an interesting point around agencies, and needing to be on the forefront, and I do agree with that. But I also, I've always been a proponent of clients get the advertising they deserve. So, and you've heard that said before. I didn't make that up. But that's a point, because it's clients that have to be pushing it as well. And I think you just described something. We've gone and how we've started to turn this is, doing things for the goodness of society is good, but when you do it for growth, it is sustainable. If we were just to get the market shares of our, and I will say Hispanic, Black, Asian Pacific, and Native American, if we get our market share equal to the average, because they're not average, they're a little bit below, equal to, it's $500 million to $1 billion in extra sales a year. That's good for growth. That's why it's smart. And I think what we have to help, what businesses and clients need to be thinking about is that, look, by having your market shares, in fact, what we've actually pushed our teams to say, we should be overdeveloped among Hispanics. We should have a greater share among Hispanics, and that's going to be worth a lot of money. The other thing is that when you eliminate those systemic investment inequalities and invest into the Hispanic community, that drives market growth, because that's investing into the communities and driving business. When you invest in a Hispanic-owned media company or an agency, then you're actually making the community better. So I think it's I think this is one of the things that we need to do as the Hispanic community, is bring these simple truths to help people understand, help them understand the power of the Hispanic community. When we do that, I think then more and more companies now will get this flywheel started to be able to really achieve the kind of good and growth that we deserve.
That sounds great. And having the Hispanic Star and also the Hispanic Promise as tools,
Correct.
It's simple. They're out there. They belong to all of us. And I think that change is always possible, but you have to make it available for people in simple ways so that they can actually access change for good and change for growth. So what I would like to wrap up with is Luis Miguel and I, there's very few people that I admire and respect more, but we had a rough start, isn't it? Because I was all about diversity and inclusion, and he got me to understand that it was very important to mix it together with investment on marketing as well. And we started talking about creating the Hispanic Marketing Promise. How do we actually put all the principles that you said, Marc, here, and bringing them to companies in a way that it is clear that these are sort of like the principles you should do, and maybe at the end of that, create a fund to provide education and jobs for Hispanics that need to be in front of camera, behind camera. We're not there precisely because we might not have internships or apprenticeships, scholarships, and mentorships. So I say from these, we should just take action. We're action driven, and you're like business avengers. So I think that we can use the Hispanic Star framework to advance this and put it in front of more.
I love that idea. That's the beauty of the Hispanic Star, is it creates this umbrella, this unifying umbrella. The Estamos Unidos campaign that we created together, the three of us created together, along with our all Hispanic team, was about being together. So bringing this together and then putting the Hispanic Marketing Promise underneath that, I think will really galvanize efforts. And then I love it. So sign me up. Let's go. Let's make this happen.
Let's do it. I want to close with a great quote that I recently found. This past weekend, I celebrated my birthday, so it had me thinking about age. Let me quote: "There's a fountain of youth. It is your mind, your talents, the creativity you bring to your life, and the lives of people you love. When you learn to tap the source, you will truly have defeated age." Sophia Loren said that, and I think it really applies to what we're saying.
And she said that when she was 89 or something, I'm sure, because she's so awesome. This is great. Thank you so much, Luis Miguel, Marc Pritchard, for being the leaders of our community, for opening the way for transformation of our community, and for being part of the Hispanic, not only the Hispanic Leadership Summit, for the Hispanic Star.
Thank you, Claudia and Luis Miguel. It's an honor to work with you. Let's keep going.
Likewise.